Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to I gotta say this in order actually because it's the Gladiator and the Educator. My name is Aaron.
This is Ernie.
And this is the podcast. Today we have the pleasure and the honor and all of those things to welcome in members of the Fort Morgan Police Department locally here. And we're going to talk about some stuff. We're going to shoot from the hip a little bit with Ernie and myself, but we'll go ahead and you guys can introduce yourself as we kind of go around, and then we'll kind of get started with what we're going to do. So we will start with...
All right, my name is Paul Mendoza. I've been a police officer since roughly 2013. I left here for a little bit and then decided to come back in 2018. So been here ever since. Grew up around here too. So
nice. So hometown
Yep.
kid.
Uh-huh.
That's good. That's awesome.
My name is John Renteria. I've been an officer since 2010. Majority of my career here in Fort Morgan. Grew up mainly on the east side of the state in Ray, Colorado.
Nice.
My name is Loren Sharp. I'm the Chief of Police for the Fort Morgan Police Department. I've been here for 27 years. Been the chief for the past 6 months.
All right. Well, now you know who's on the podcast. What we're going to talk about is a whole bunch of stuff about COVID. I will make a mark on this, and we'll be right back to chat with these guys about all the things in our community and more with the help of Ernie and the rest of us. We'll be back in a sec.
City of mine, how I love the city of mine.
I was born in the city, I was raised on its edges. My pop worked his life when it's complex. I found love in its center. If I could live here forever, think it'd be for the better. I love the weather, I love the people. This is city, I met all my best friends. And I wanna thank every brick, I wanna thank every entrance to every building that I step in this city of mine.
City of mine, how I love this city of mine.
All right. Welcome back to the podcast. We have Fort Morgan Police Department with us. And Ernie, our Gladiator, is going to start us off with some questions for our officers.
All right. To start out with, I wanted to give a shout out and thank Paul Mendoza and John Renteria. They're both on our Fort Morgan Gladiators boxing team. John Renteria is a registered USA boxing coach. Paul Mendoza, competitive fighter. So thank you guys for helping our team out and being an asset to our boxing team. Thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.
That's an honor.
Thank you guys. And it's pretty awesome having Loren over here. I've known your wife. She was taught my daughters when they were younger, and over at Baker, I remember having her. And it's nice having you as a chief, man. I appreciate everything you do for the community, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here.
And what my main question that I had for you guys was, over the pandemic and all the crap going on, one of the things we were doing was helping out, delivering lunches and doing what we can around the community, and we recognize the numbers of domestic violence, child abuse, alcoholism, all the bad stuff that's detrimental to any community. We seen that going up, and not only in our community, but in the state and in the nation. And you guys dealing with it having to enforce. What are some of the things that you guys have ran into, or that you noticed from before COVID, before the lockdowns to now?
I'd say that for me, the difference before COVID and then during COVID and everything, like you said, definitely the rise in certain crimes. Just because during the pandemic, everything was on lockdown, things were shut down, people were not getting out and about, like normal. So getting a little stir crazy, alcoholism, alcohol went through the roof kind of thing. So dealing more with that kind of stuff, assaults, DVs, and maybe a little bit more violent kind of crimes. I know definitely last year all the years I've been here, last year I've seen more motor vehicle thefts than I've ever seen.
Wow, that's interesting.
Or being from Fort Morgan, or the cars that were stolen out of Denver being here that we found. We definitely seen an uptick in that last year during the pandemic.
I see.
What do you think the correlation is to that? Is it because everyone was just home and there was more opportunity, or is it just because and you could the theory might be that maybe because the criminals are all home, they're looking for something local to do, or they're looking for something easy to get after. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that at all.
I mean, maybe more like the easy road, kind
Right.
of the easy route thing. Again, a lot of people were out of job last year. A lot of people were struggling big
So
time.
whatever they could do to get money.
So I was going to say, I'm sure theft has gone up.
Theft and again, the easy thing. The criminals knew what was going on, lockdowns and all that. So they knew it was pretty much a kind of a time of opportunity for them.
Right.
I think it's a greater cause as well. We're in a society right now where we don't want to incarcerate people for mental health issues with drug issues, and I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. We need to work with those people. But what we saw with COVID was also not jailing people. So we actually had a person that we arrested early in the morning for breaking into somebody's car. Later, they were not held in jail because we couldn't hold them in jail due to COVID restrictions. And they were arrested again later that same day. Wow. So when you see people that are violating the law and not being held accountable in the short term, even though they may be held accountable in the long term, they continually repeat crime. So I think our crime rates are higher because you have the same small percentage of people committing crimes repeatedly.
Right.
So I think there's some of that as well and we're seeing that.
That's
for sure.
100% true.
It's kind of a revolving door kind of deal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with the COVID restrictions last year, because the jails didn't want the spread. So
it wasn't as much as more criminals. It was kind of the same criminals repeating.
Right.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
I think the percentage of people that commit crime is still the same. Very small.
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
Very
It's just
small. Most of us
more
are law-abiding
crime-
people.
More
Yep.
crime happening because they're repeating the crime. I see what you're saying.
Exactly,
now.
yep.
Makes sense.
and like Chief Sharp said, the mental health thing on that one too, just because the mental health resources are very
Very
scarce
slim.
out there.
Yeah, very slim. That's unfortunate.
And having to try to help people that are dealing with mental health illness and not having those resources.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
see what you're saying. Yeah.
And this sounds bad. We don't want to incarcerate people for being mentally ill. But when mentally ill people commit crime and we can incarcerate them, sometimes that's the only place they get the help that they need.
Right.
Because we can't arrest you for being mentally ill, but if you're out on the street and you're barely capable of taking care of yourself and you're not really doing things, we can't do anything to help you. And sometimes them going to jail actually provides the services that they need to be better outside of the jail setting.
This is a question probably for you, Chief, but also for you two. Living in rural Colorado is a very different experience than living in like a Denver metro. I say this, but I also acknowledge that mental health services across the country have been losing funding. Mm-hmm. They've been decreased. Before I left Denver 4 years ago, there was a house. It was called Arapahoe House, I think, and it was a psychological help. It was a big, huge part of their program to help folks who had mental health issues. And there was an issue with funding or something happened, and it was like they're done. And they're shut down. And everyone that talked about it wasn't like, oh, this is a good thing. They're like, this is the worst possible outcome that could happen because so many people struggle. And I think to your point, they when you pick them up, be it for whatever reason that they've offended the law, they've broken whatever, you're able to say there's something going on here that's more than just hey, we gotta put some cuffs on you and take you down to the house. It's like, no, there's something going on here. We need to put you on a hold. We need to get somebody down here to check you out because there might be a way that we can help you. And the problem is that funding and that resource in Denver Metro, it's not it lost. But I would want to ask the question: would you say it's harder, or how much harder is it in a rural area to get that support and to get those services to people that need them? On top of it being COVID, on top of all that, what does that challenge look and feel like?
I don't know if it's harder here. I think the problem is that law enforcement is law enforcement. That's our job. But society expects so much more from us. They expect us to do something that we don't have the capability of doing. We're not set up to arrest people for being mentally ill.
Right.
We don't want to arrest people
that,
for being
yeah.
mentally ill.
We don't want that.
And yet, if they're mentally ill and people see them as a threat to society, they want them dealt with. But police can't do that.
I
So
see.
we don't have that authority. But I don't think it's any different in a big city. The police still aren't set up to do that as well. So I don't think there's really any mechanism in our country right now to deal with some of those issues. There is M1 holds and things for people that are completely incapable of taking care of themselves or they're a threat to society. But a lot of these people self-medicate through drug use. They have other issues, and they are able to function. They're not out there breaking the law. They're not killing themselves. They're not killing somebody else.
Right.
They're just different, and people don't feel comfortable around them, and they want them dealt with.
They want them dealt with. And kind of to your point, I think there's also the layer of, and there's a there's a lot of conversation out there in the world about what policing should and shouldn't be right now. And there is a lot of voices that have voiced their opinions, and I feel, I got to use that because they tell you to use that in therapy because I don't want to say that I know anything, but I feel like, Morgan, we have a handle of what policing should be in this community as much as we have the ability and the resources and the finances and all that stuff to do. And I think it's hard because you look at a Denver, you look at a New York, you look at a big city where there is a lot of conversation about defunding the police and all these other issues, which perspectives are perspectives. I can't say, I'm not going to hear to say, well, they're wrong and they're wrong. And there's a happy medium. I would never suggest we defund our police because, good God, we need them here in our community. But what you're kind of saying is we don't have that ability, but you also don't have the training. And to ask you that, to say, well, okay, you got to do this, 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 and this as your normal police officer responsibility is on patrol and whatever. But now we're going to ask you to be mental health professionals.
Right.
And I don't know how I feel about that. I still haven't figured out where I'm sitting or standing on that. I'm curious, does that feel like that would be a fit, or is that like we have so much that we're already handling? We need to create a mental health something.
A unit, maybe a unit of some type.
I don't know. I'm spitballing here. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
We do
I
have
like that.
mental health training,
Okay.
but it's just not as far as the mental health
Yes,
side.
yes,
you
yes,
know what I mean? We just learn how to deal with them.
Yeah.
But we don't know how. We don't arrest like
Yeah, I see.
Chief
Is
said,
there
we
is
don't-
there a way to, maybe is there funding out? I know there's the lack of funding's the big problem, but is there a way
it's
to
huge.
find funding to help, I guess, train the police on to deal with mental health?
You know, I'm really confused about all of this because I hear this as well.
Yes, that's I'm sure
But
you are.
but let me say, if we get called for a 911 call
Yeah.
because somebody is feeling threatened, I don't think you're going to send a mental health worker to go
Yeah,
deal with
I know,
that.
just-
And I don't think we're going to know that that's a mental health episode until we get there.
Yeah.
Right.
So when we get there and we see it's a mental health episode, we have to deal with it on the short term. Then we could call in the resources.
Right, because
But
in that moment, there's seconds.
Yeah, and this whole thing that I keep hearing about, we need more training, we need all that.
Yeah.
We are trained. We focus on CIT to try to do some intervention training for people to be able to communicate with them. These
What
people
exactly is CIT?
if these guys have gone to training yet?
gone.
He can
I'm
probably
going.
explain a little better.
So CIT training is basically it's a week-long course, and you go there and they talk about all kinds of mental health illnesses, and kind of how to recognize what you're dealing with, if they're bipolar, manic, all that kind of things. But the great thing about that training is they bring in these professional actors.
Okay.
And these professional actors, you get to run through scenarios with them. And I'll tell you, these actors are very, very
So
good.
They get to
Almost-
act
almost
crazy
real
for their
time,
job.
huh?
Yeah.
almost.
You kind of question whether they are
Yeah, you
truly.
just try- that's
They're
good.
very
That's
good
good
actors.
training.
And so it gives you that opportunity to go through the scenario with that actor in a safe spot.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because someone can call timeout and they can coach you and say, hey, try this avenue instead of what you're just doing. Instead of saying
makes
that,
sense.
say
That's good.
this.
That sounds like some good stuff.
It was really good. Like I said, that part of it, I really love that part just because to get that experience. And then, like I said, it's really good training. But again, it doesn't make us
Yeah, you're
experts
not
in mental health.
It allows us to go there and help deal with the people that have these issues and not escalate a situation, because trying to speak to them reasonably may not help.
Yeah.
But being able to understand where they're coming from and being able to learn to communicate with them to keep them calm is beneficial. But we can't solve their problem on that call.
Well, and kind of what you had said about is all about how you approach.
Exactly.
You use certain words, and they talk about this in not just in education as teachers. Like they always tell you, like, don't go in on a kid, like don't do this, like start soft, and that can happen in a mental health situation because depending on what they're dealing with or what they're struggling with, a sentence or a phrase may just. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
It's go time. They're off, and they're not even going to listen.
Right.
You never know.
Right.
And
Yeah, you
that's,
never know.
and I want. Yeah, I was going to ask that question. As police officers, there is that split-second decision that happens.
Right.
And again, a feeling that I have is to add an additional layer of requiring or asking you to do the mental health calculations in your head in those 2.5 seconds or less. That's a lot.
Right.
And I don't know how. I don't have a feeling on it yet. But to your point, you're like, we can't do everything.
Yeah, I mean, we're called law enforcement for a reason, and yet we're asked to do so much more than that. And when we're enforcing the law, that's one thing. And it really, the law doesn't differentiate mental health issues. It doesn't differentiate drug abuse. It doesn't differentiate anything. It's either legal or it's illegal.
Right.
And it's our job to enforce it. But the way we enforce it for each individual may be different based on their reaction. And that's how we have to be trained and try to learn to deal with them appropriately.
I see. That's good. What are some of the things as community leaders, parents in the community, teachers? What are some of the things that we can do? Do you guys suggest that we can do or recommend, or any ideas that we can do to help transition from the lockdown, from what was happening before and what you guys are seeing now, kind of the escalation of everybody coming back out from being, and what I'm as a teacher, my wife's a teacher, and some of the disciplinary has been really, really high because of kids not
They're crazy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, just you let them out and they're excited to see their friends. They're going to be hyperactive. They're going to be excited. So it's the discipline.
I think that like being out and being active is probably a huge key on getting back to normal and kids interacting with each other and
People interacting
with each other.
So parents, families getting out.
Yeah,
get out in the community,
I think
do the
just getting
community
out,
events.
Getting those endorphins flowing and just doing everything,
At the same time, accountability.
Yeah,
Accountability for everybody. We have to hold each other accountable. You can't expect the police to hold us accountable. We can't expect teachers to hold us accountable. As parents, we need to hold our kids accountable. But as friends, we need to hold our friends accountable. We need to be holding each other accountable.
Right. I love that. And as a community, like I was explaining to DeLay coming from Denver, the police here, their community members, their wives go to work with our wives. Their kids are going to school with our kids. It's a small community, so it's not like. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's it. It's definitely a different dynamic policing in a smaller community than policing in the metro area. Different dynamic all around, kind of like that. Like you said, we see each other at Walmart.
It's more family, more.
Our kids are going
together
to school and everything, so it's just a different dynamic.
Right. And even people that we've arrested. Hey, what's up? Like we see them in the community. Hi, there's no.
I walk into 7-Eleven,
no animosity.
And there they are.
It's awesome. It's a different community.
That's funny. Years ago, I used to take my mom. She didn't live here at the time, and she would come down here and we'd go to dinner, and people would come talk to me for 10 minutes, and she'd be like, "Who was that?" And I was like, somebody I've arrested. People don't understand that we live in this community. We care for people whether we arrest them or not. We still care for them. They're still members of our community. We still respect them, and they respect us. And I think that's what separates us from large cities. And that's also our frustration when we see some of the laws and some of the things that get pushed because of issues or perceived issues. I don't know if they're issues or not. In another city. Denver has a problem, and all of a sudden Fort Morgan has to suffer the consequences of one officer doing something, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. This was an isolated incident as far as we're concerned. I've never seen anything like that, and yet laws will be passed that impact all of us in a negative way, as though Fort Morgan police is the same as what happened with George Floyd. It's frustrating.
That was one of the things that I liked about last year when we were doing the meetings, and we had you and Crone, I believe it was, and we some of the police officers, the perspectives from some of the refugees that in our community, some of the are not used to a small community, and they see the policing on TV or where they're from, and it's not suitable. So when they come to this community, they're very, very, I guess, afraid, or they feel intimidated by the police.
They've already got baggage. They're already carrying that. They're like, the police are going to do this to me, or I've already got this idea, and it's like, well.
But I think the thing we have to be careful of is we try to use statistics. I see law enforcement all the time try to say, well, statistically speaking, but statistics don't matter. They're not going to trump your experiences. So if you come from a place and you've been beaten by the police, I don't care if you're 1/10 of 1% of people, you're going to believe you're going to get beaten by the police. So those statistics don't matter to people. Your experiences matter. And so I think people in a community like this don't have those experiences. They don't see it that way. And even though that might be a small segment of our population, if they're coming from somewhere where that is their experience, we're not going to change that belief until they assimilate to our way of living, essentially.
Have a different experience.
And they interact
or
with us,
or they interact with you. I was going to say, like, they have having a different experience with the police. I'm going to use an example that happened about a year ago. So there was a situation in the park. Some kids were getting yelled at, or something was happening. Someone was saying something bad to some kids, and mom posted about it on Facebook. And I tagged in Fort Morgan Police, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you guys want to take a look at this, because the lady had said an officer showed up and he backed up my kids, and I just want to, you know, make sure that that's covered and that's everything's okay. And I think you reached out, or even Heather reached out and said, hey, thanks for the heads up. We circled back. We're working with the officer. We've identified who it is. Thank you for that information. We will address this. And I just sat in my chair going, what just happened? I was like, that doesn't happen in Denver. Like, if I tagged the Arapahoe County Sheriffs, they're a big department. Like, there's no shade on them, but they wouldn't be like, oh, well, let me pull that into my file and start digging up and finding what's going on. They got enough stuff to deal with. But in this community, I'm able to say, hey, here's this thing, guys, check it out, and y'all like, we got it. We're figuring this out. And I think, I mean, the mom was very thankful that, hey, they stepped up. The police are investigating. They're aware, and the people in that comment section were like, yeah, our police are fine. Like, they'll take care of this. I'm glad to hear that, because they were like, there was like this suspicion of like, oh, did the police take the side of the guy? And the mom's like, no. He backed my kids up, and he was there, and it was fine. But it's like, that world is so weird for people who come from those big cities, and they're like, wait, the police actually care? Like, again, no shade on any other metro area. That's what I'm saying. But it's a community. I know most, like, I've seen you in the shop. I've seen you you were on the school board previously. That was one of your positions. We know each other, and we can hold each other accountable to be like, okay, hey, let's find out who this dude is, and let's make sure this doesn't happen again, and let's kind of circle back on that. So that, I love that part of this town. And I think it's weird for people, because I've had folks I've interviewed from Denver, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't call the police when there's some yelling happening outside our yard. Their reasoning is, well, if the police show up, there might be a situation. I understand that. I don't particularly know if I agree or disagree with that at this point, but that wouldn't happen here. It'd be like, no, we're going to call the police because we know they're going to do it right. They're going to figure out what's going on. They're going to talk to those people. They're going to have that CIT training. There's that confidence and trust there, and I think that's unique to this town.
I'm confident that every single member of this police department understands how important every community member is to our success.
Yeah.
We know that we couldn't police this town without the community, and we need the community's involvement. For us to isolate ourselves and somehow see ourselves different than part of the community would not be successful for anybody.
I'm curious. Last year, after we were doing our meetings and stuff, if any of the other organizations reached out to meet with you guys, because I know we had discussed a few things about some of the I can't remember the dang organizations. My mind's drawing a blank, but I know they mentioned that they were going to reach out to you guys and kind of get a little more perspective. I'm curious if did that ever happen, or
it never happened.
Okay.
I actually, after I was named chief, I actually reached out to some of those individuals and tried to bring them to the table, and I've gotten no response from them. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah,
I don't know if they feel frustrated. I don't know if maybe the issues have been addressed and they don't feel that they're issues. I don't know. We're trying to get a gauge for that, but we're definitely open to listening to anybody.
Well, I'm going to reach out to a few of them myself, because I know a few of them, and if you guys would be interested in coming back and discussing like we did last time, but do it kind of on a smaller scale, in a podcast here with the educator over here. Yeah, I'd be willing. Like I said, I would, because I had a couple of them mention a few things here and there, and I'm nothing too serious, but let's draw, like I told them last time, let's hold. They mentioned some of the police officers were kind of, I wouldn't say bullying, but maybe targeting their kids at the park, or targeting some kids at the park. And I told them, well, get the officer's name, get their badge number, get the police,
Right.
And we're talking to the boss. And I'm not going to say we're kind of ratting on them, but let's
part of being held accountable.
That's what I'm saying.
It's all accountability.
Let's hold them accountable to what. So I'm going to kind of reach out to them and see if they would love to. I'm sure they would love to come and kind of discuss a few things, especially over the past year. You know, and then coming out of the lockdowns and coming out of everything, and kind of transition into like some type of normalcy or some type of, I don't know, but hopefully a better situation than what we were in before. And so I'm going to reach out and talk to them. So we may be reaching out and getting back to you guys a little bit more.
Please do.
I was going to ask a question actually, because I know you guys have held. I think it was last week there was a movie at the park, and there was also before that there was like a meet with the police, or it's not. It was
fireside chat.
Yeah, there. That's my favorite thing. Was there actually a fire? Like no, there wasn't. Like
no.
Okay, no. Okay, all right. We'll work on that. We'll see if we can get you a fire to put up there just for the heck of it. Do you find that those events, or how do you find those events in the success? Are they functional? Do they help? Are they?
What is the turnout? What is the turnout?
Yeah.
Do you get,
Yeah.
Do you
And,
get
and that's
community
the
members
question.
out there?
It depends on your definition of success. I would deem it a success, and here's why.
Okay.
Very few people show up.
Okay.
And I know that doesn't sound right, but people usually don't show up to say great things about the police. So when we tell you we're out here and we're here available and we want your feedback and people don't show up, that probably tells us that people aren't really upset about the police service. If we have a lot of people there, they're usually probably there with pitchforks and torches, right? They're not. They're not there to say, "Hey, great job." So
that makes a lot of
sense.
sense.
So the success comes from being available, letting everybody know we're out there. You can come to my office. You can come wherever you want to come, but we'll come out to the public and we'll let you come talk to us in public, wherever it is. And if people don't show up, that probably means that we don't have issues.
How often are you guys doing these events? Is it once a month?
So we're going to get back into doing Coffee with the Cop. We haven't done that since COVID happened.
Yeah.
But this was a fireside chat. It's the mayor and the city manager and I. So it was all city leadership.
That's awesome.
It's to try to be transparent to the community. If people are concerned about where their tax dollars are going, we recognize as a city, we represent the people of the city. So
are you guys going to be doing that again with the same
We're
group?
doing 3 of them. Every night there's a movie. There's going to be a fireside chat prior to that.
Sweet.
And the August 10th, we will be doing our big barbecue with the Blue, which has been a huge turnout. We've gotten tons of money from the community. I expect a really big event coming on August 10th.
Awesome.
For the community, free food. We're going to have games for the kids. We're going to have all kinds of stuff here at City Park. But between that and the movie, we'll do another fireside chat. So hopefully we're going to get a lot of people there for that. People will stick around for the movie, and we'll have an opportunity to interact with people.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to look out for that and get that shared on our boxing page on social media to kind of let community members know, because I don't even think a lot of them don't even realize that there's ways to get, to be able to talk with the chief, to
right.
be able to talk with the mayor, to be able to talk with the community.
And all of us,
leaders.
I will say, on behalf of the mayor, the city manager, myself, all of us, our phone numbers are out there. You're welcome to call us. I'll be happy to talk to you at my office. We can set up a meeting. I'll come to you, whatever. If people have concerns, we want to hear it.
That's awesome.
We do work for the community, and we want to do our work for the community.
I love that.
All right, so the chief has talked a lot, but I want to hear your delightful voices, because
Thank you.
you're welcome. We'll tag you out for a minute. We'll be back in a sec. So for you guys, I kind of want to turn it to more of a positive, because no community is perfect, and Fort Morgan has its imperfections. It has its issues. Denver does. Every city you go to is going to have dynamics that are like, oof, that's a thing we got to work on. And Fort Morgan has its share, and I as a guy who's only been here, this is my coming into my 4th year, so 3 total years. It's been very interesting to watch kind of how things are and how things kind of are getting dealt with, but also are not. So that's acknowledging that Fort Morgan is imperfect, like every other city in the world. But what I want to swing into is, what are some good things that you've seen in this community coming out of the lockdown? What things you've heard of, or things you've personally watched, or things you've seen or experienced? What are those good, like, there's signs that things are getting better and that we're figuring out how to be better humans together, or however you're going to phrase it. What are some good things you've seen in this community as we're bouncing back?
Well, I know that from what I've seen, we haven't been as bad as metro area as far as lockdown and all that goes. People have been kind of getting out, doing stuff. Ernie's been doing some Hibbit training and stuff like that, and people have been showing up to that. So we really haven't, and we have a great community, so we really haven't had anything terrible.
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything terrible. I mean, what I've seen, just some of the fundraiser stuff that's happened. I've seen people actually helping out their neighbor kind of thing, willing to get out there and help them. Ernie, again, watching him do the lunch program stuff, that kind of things, and how many people would come and help that. Or you seeing posts on Facebook, someone saying, hey, I got a job here, I need a ride, and then seeing people comment saying, what times, I'll get you there. Just everybody coming together like that in this community. I've seen a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this is now going to be a personal question, and if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. It's fine. I won't be upset. And this extends also to the chief as well. What's one thing you've learned about yourself in this year, in this unique experience? And it can be more than one thing. If you've got 3 things, you're like, bam, bam, this is the thing. Whatever, you can do any order, any number. But what is something you've learned about yourself as either a police officer, a community member, a parent, or whatever roles you hold in this community? What's 1 or 2 things you've learned that's good and that you've taken away from this pandemic?
I've learned that I could be more patient than I've ever thought possible. I mean, you're in your house with your family. When it first happened, you were in your house with your family for days at a time, and You know how that goes.
Yeah, even with your own kids, you kind of start.
Yeah.
Your patience
So then
starts getting a little-
Especially with your own kids.
Yeah,
Right.
with your own kids.
Yeah, your patience wears thin. You know, and then you come to work, everything is stressful on top of that, and
Yeah.
you just learn that. I just learned that I'm more patient than I ever thought that I could be.
Control, I love it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, with this past year, the stress levels have definitely been a lot higher than usual. For me, definitely learning to, being there for not only my family more, but my guys too. Because again, stress levels, you're at home, your family's not doing anything, then you come to work, your guys are going through the same thing, you're working with, and then we're dealing with what we deal with on the street. And so just being there for them as a friend and someone they can vent to or whatever, or looking out for them, saying, you're recognizing something's going on with them, so you just pull them to the side and chat with them, let them get it off their chest kind of thing.
For me, I'd say along those lines, adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been adaptable. The police department, from the beginning, before I was even chief, this started coming up, and we started sending people home and paying them to not be at work so that we could try to protect people from COVID, trying to look out for them, but mostly looking out for the community. If one of our officers gets COVID and they're out helping the community, they're spreading it too. So we need to keep people safe. And if one officer gets it and spreads it to the rest of the department, we got nobody to work. So trying to figure out how can we adapt to what's presented in front of us. And as things change, we have to constantly adapt and move with it. So,
Right.
Ernie, any other questions before we move over to the chief's question he was talking about earlier?
I'm just curious if you guys seen any more unity in the community from. I mean, I know there's the people losing their crap, but I mean, the reason I ask is the first month that of the lockdowns, I think I might have went through a little bit of depression, but after talking with my daughters and realizing, man, we're all here together. This is the first. My daughters are 24, 23, 21, and
Right.
17, so it's like they're hardly ever home, and during the lockdown they were home 24/7, so it was, to me, it was like, man, this is freaking awesome. This is pretty cool. Well, I mean, I learned to love my family more, and I learned, like, we don't need any, I mean, I'm not gonna say we don't need anybody else, but to be happy, I just seen more bonding and more unity within in the household.
Right.
And even when the lockdown was still going on, and they were like, okay, you can play out you can stay out in your yards, or you stay within your yard. Even in our neighborhood, I was going out and delivering lunches, but during driving through the neighborhood, you see families out in their yards kind of spending more time together and being, bonding. I was wondering if you guys recognize any of that with families being tighter, and I do hear you talking about more community unity, people reaching out and doing that. So that is awesome.
I think we do have more community unity. And as far as what you do, what you got going on is contagious. People see what you do, and people are like, oh, I want to get involved in that. I want to do what he does. I want to hang out with this guy because this is what he brings happiness, And so people see that in the small community, so people talk to each other, and you guys get more, like, the suicide prevention stuff, all that stuff kind of just flows, and then the community just grows and flourishes. It's awesome to see.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing better than giving back to the community. We get to do it every day and get paid for it. But some of the stuff that you're doing, Ernie, is remarkable.
Wow.
I hope that some of our officers are doing some of that in their off time. I hope that we can teach people to do that. And I do think that some people have been doing things for others that they hadn't done before. And I do think as you start to see that spreads, because there's no greater feeling than being able to do something for someone else.
I love it.
Right.
Love it, man.
Well, and I think to that point, and I've talked with Ernie about this briefly. There are opportunities for volunteer work in this community, but there's not like a centralized, hey, here's where you go to get all that information. And I think this is a challenge for us at the Gladiator Gym, to figure out ways to connect people to volunteer opportunities, be it through the police department, be it through One Morgan County, be it through all kinds of places. I think it's the next, I hate this word because it sounds like avocado toast, but like organic. Like, it's the next organic step to. They actually, I was going to order avocado toast a couple days ago, and I said no avocado toast.
The avocado toast at Bon Appetit is delicious.
Bon
Just so you know.
Appetit is
Ernie, we're not
amazing.
friends anymore. Avocado toast is, we're not going to go off on that tangent. But anyway, my point is that, like, it seems like it's the next step for us as a community of, like, we've spent a year on lockdown, and even Ernie and his group who did the lunch deliveries last year, and it just seems like this community. It feels. Gotta use that word again.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like we're hungry for something more.
They want to do that, yes.
And it's figuring out how to get that done and how to create opportunities for that, I think, is probably a challenge. And that might be a conversation with the police department. It might be a conversation with Ernie. It might be a conversation with Morgan County and organizations.
I like that idea. I like that idea. Maybe like a contact point for resources in the community.
I also think it's more simple. I think
Yeah.
we can walk out of our own house, look to our left, look to our right, look at our neighbors. Some of our neighbors need help. I mean, there's people that aren't able to care for their yards. They have health problems. They have, family that's not here to help them, and they're elderly. There's different things that we could be helping. We don't need to find an organization to volunteer for. We can help our neighbors.
Right.
If we all help our neighbors, we don't have a need for those other formal
Chief,
organizations.
that's a drop the mic moment. If you're unfamiliar, please don't drop the mic. It's very expensive. But I think you're right. I think we get, and I'll freely admit that I get spun up and like, oh, we need to organize and do these things. But the reality of it is like, just look to your left and your right. You will, and even look down the block. You will find someone who needs somebody or needs something, and there's an opportunity to step in. You guys actually, as a police department, through, his name is Rodney Smith?
Yes.
He, so in case you're listening and you're wondering who that is, he's on Facebook, but he's a dude, he travels the country with lawnmowers, and he specially designs some of them for police departments, and he will bring them in and gift them to the police departments, and the police departments then take those, it's called New Horizons, I believe is the program, and they will then go and seek out people in the community who are struggling, both either physically, mentally, or whatever, and they need help with their lawn care. Can you kind of walk us through how that program came to be and how it came to Fort Morgan?
So Rodney Smith's program and what we're doing is a little bit different,
Okay.
but you're exactly right with his program. I saw that on Facebook, and at the same time, Officers Galliano and Tim Malone, who are our SROs, were wanting to do a program over the summer where they were working with some kids.
Okay.
And so they wanted to take a group of kids and try to do some fun activities and be mentors to them.
Yeah.
I saw this and they talked about doing some community service, and I saw this program that Rodney Smith was doing, and so we incorporated both.
Nice.
So
Real quick, an SRO is a school resource officer.
Yes.
Just to let everyone know that's on here. He said they are SROs.
We have acronyms in teaching too. I'm like, I got to explain this word.
But the two school resource officers are both amazing guys. They have both helped out and sponsored some of our boxers in the past. But just so you know, the SRO means school resource officers, and they are amazing.
So they took this program and they said, we want to help some kids, and they were looking for that component of community service. So I thought, what a better way to bring the two together. So Officer Galliano actually was able to make contact with Mr. Smith, who donated a lawnmower.
That's awesome.
They started the program 4 weeks ago, I believe. They've started doing some work with about 20 kids. There's going to be 3 different sessions over the summer, about 20 kids per group. They've been doing some lawn care, some cleanup. But the other day, I know there's a 95-year-old lady who's not able to take care of her yard, and I don't think it'd been mowed in 3 years in the back, probably.
Jeez.
They, along with Jeff Pope, who works for the Sarah House.
That's one of the most amazing men in our community. I love that guy.
And he works for the Sarah House. He's helping out with that as well. And they took some kids over there and they cleaned up her yard, and they've been doing some of that work as well. But they're also taking these kids and doing other fun activities and trying to give back to the community, but show these kids what it's like.
And anything Jeff does is going to be fun for the kids. I
Yep.
promise you. That guy is amazing.
Well, and Mr. Pope, as he was known when I was there, he taught for 27 years, a lot of years, a class called Life's Happening.
Yep.
And his goal was to teach kids about what life is like. What's life? Hey, how are you going to face these challenges? How are you going to face opposition? And so, the beautiful thing about that is that his spirit of that class continues in his work. And I think he also works with Sarah House as well. And for those who are listening, what is Sarah House and what is its kind of program?
The Sarah House is a sexual assault response advocate. That's what it stands for. They're a group of advocates that help Child Advocacy Center for children that are victims of whether it be sexual assault, child abuse, serious crime, also adults. So they have a nice advocacy center to help victims with those types of crimes.
Amazing. I love that.
We work closely with them, and you're right, Jeff Pope started working for them when he retired, and that's kind of how we got hooked up, because I've worked with him a lot when I was a school resource officer, even back in the day, and he was a great asset.
And Paula Bragg, I believe, is the one that
Paula
runs
Bragg
it.
runs the Sarah House.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I've known her husband, Bob. We built their house back in early 2000s, so
Yep.
I do know Paula and their family, and she's an amazing woman and with a beautiful heart.
So I think to that kind of illustrates that it's just a matter of looking down the street. Like you guys, you started looking around and things kind of connected. And you're like, okay, let's throw these two together in the microwave and let's cook them together. And we got something. We've got a program to help kids to see new horizons, to see better futures, but also to be a part of the community and helping out, a lawn that hasn't been mowed in 3 years sounds like a terrifying experience. It's like Indiana Jones. You're going to have a lot of fun in that backyard.
Let's just say I supervised for about 10 minutes there.
You're just like, okay, I need to leave. This is out of control. That's awesome. That's I think also, like, you're right. We just find a place, find somebody who needs help, because this community, there's about, I think our population in town is like 20,000. Is it 20?
I think it's probably more like
12,000. Okay, so 12,000 in the city, and then the county itself is like 29,000 or some such nonsense as that. County is much a lot bigger, obviously, but there are people who need help, and I think the accountability factor of you can listen to this podcast, you can listen to the chief, you can listen to these guys, and you can say, oh yeah, I'll do it. But unless you step out the door and say, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? It's kind of just your community needs you. And Ernie's service last year with that food was huge.
And I think just everyone and anybody that I talk to and everybody in the community that I talk to loves the ideas, and everyone's throwing around ideas of what are some of the things that we can do. What are, they have ideas. Well, we should have this. We should do this. The community needs this. And I mean, even the field house now. That's I was crying over there checking that place.
Nice.
It's beautiful.
Yep.
It's beautiful. It's amazing. But they don't realize that there are resources out there that are, and I mean, stuck in the house, especially over this past pandemic. They don't realize that there are places to go, things to do. And I just think if we were to, I think on the social media and getting stuff out there and letting them know that there are resources out there, because people don't even know that we have a gym out there. They walk in there like, wow, I never even knew this was here. I'm like, well, we've been here for almost 5 years.
Right.
It's kind of like, well, yeah, almost 5 years, and but they just don't know because they've never been out there. And I think just getting the resources out there is one of the things that we, I mean, not necessarily the resources, but getting the knowledge that there are resources out there, because people just don't know. They just have no idea.
And every time you feel like everybody knows, you find out nobody knows.
Yeah, right.
No matter how much we put it out there, it seems like there's all those people that had no idea.
That's one of the hardest things that I find.
Yep.
All right. Before we swing into the chief's conversation about what program you all are putting together, was there anything else you guys wanted to add or say, put out there, voice?
I would say for me, before we get into that conversation, that people need to understand that at law enforcement, we're people too. We're human. We went through the pandemic too. We went through all the same stresses and the worries.
You don't have a Superman's cape? You were not invulnerable? What?
No,
This is a shock.
So just understanding that also, and understanding what we go through on a daily basis on the job, and just coming up. Sometimes it's just nice to hear someone come up and want to chat or say hi, or just to shake our hand or something, instead of being spitting at us or something, or saying horrible, vulgar things to us, just because of what's going on in the whole country and everything. So just for people to remember that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I think as a community, they've done a great job of seeing us, out eating at Subway or something like that. And they're like, hey, thank you guys for your service. Let me buy your meal. No, but thank you for saying it. You know what I mean? Like, even that, just saying it is being appreciated.
Well,
it's
the fact
good enough.
the fact that they feel comfortable enough to approach you.
Right.
I think that's a signal of, like, you know what? I'm not going to try and say Fort Morgan is different, but it is.
Yeah.
It's a different world here, and it's been amazing for me to sit in this community for 3 years, and now going on a fourth and wanting to stick around. It's like, you know what? I know, and even before you were chief, like, most of the officers, I was like, okay, like, I know those guys are pretty good, but I would say in the last, because you started how many months ago, or a year ago?
6 months ago. Yep.
I think as that was happening, something shifted. And I don't know if, and it felt even like rank and file, something shifted, where there was suddenly just this, okay, we're able to be the police department we need to be. And no shade on the people who were previous, like, that's not my job here, but it was just suddenly and the community almost felt a shift of, like, we have a chief of police now. We have an actual person who is in that position, who we know, who we have seen, who's been a part of this community. And you don't get that a lot in Metro Denver.
Right.
So I think it's a kick in the
It's
pants.
a nice dynamic to have.
Yeah,
It really is. And my brother David's one of the police officers, or he's a sergeant.
Corporal.
Corporal.
Yeah.
Damn, I knew that. I should have known that, Dave. I'm sorry about that, brother. Sorry about that, brother. I love you,
I'm
man.
sure he would
Sorry, your
appreciate.
dad the other day thought I was still a school resource officer. Okay?
He hasn't been a resource officer since we were in high school.
Yeah. I see. Well,
I'm sure David would appreciate the promotion there.
Yeah.
well, just talking
Bring
with
him
David,
back
though.
down.
Talking with David though, and asking him, has it been a lot more tough with arresting people and stuff like that, and just knowing Paul is how long have I known you, Paul? Since you were in what,
Since we
middle
were
school,
middle
elementary
school,
school, you and
yeah.
David, yeah. So knowing them and just knowing the type of people they are, it's like when I see them interact with the community members, they're not acting like they're better than anybody else. When they are arresting people and talking with David, I'm like, you don't have much issues. He's like, well, just talk with people like a damn human. And
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, you do. That's,
yeah, well, that's basically what it is. Just talk with them like a human. Let them know I
That is.
understand, okay? And when you go in, he said a lot of our cops go in with the understanding as opposed to being the authority. Well, you're a red. You need,
Right.
Right.
They go in with an understanding. All right, I understand how it is, and that's what I asked him. I'm like, do you have trouble? He's like, nah, they said, not an issue at all. And I just think that's one of the things that with our community and like DeLay was saying over the last 6 months, year or whatever, watching the community accept police
Right.
with open arms as opposed to being this, like he was saying, spitting on or being and having police officers like my brother David, like Paul, like John. These are ones that I know personally, and like even Adriano. I knowing these guys personally. If I had to deal with them getting arrested, I would love them arresting me as opposed to a cop that's got ego and
Right.
wanting to
Yeah.
be the
Oh yeah.
having the issues.
And like John and Paul said, we've got great support from our community. I couldn't be more proud of the support we have. But that comes from our staff as well.
Yeah.
I think we have some of the best staff in the state. I would put our staff at the police department up against any other police department in the United States. I think they're very high quality.
I back that one up.
And
agree.
and those go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If not for great people in the police department, I don't know that the community would support us as well. And I think we've done a good job of trying to bring people like Paul and David and Joe and so many that are born and raised in our community, and
Yeah.
bringing in people like John that want to be in a community this size, and,
Yeah.
and that's really what we're focused. And I think that's helped a lot.
Well, and to kind of close that out, it's in your wife knows this. In school, it's about our relationships. Relationships with if I build a relationship with my classroom, they're going to do a lot more work for me. They're going to actually respond, respect, and trust me. Versus if all I do is just be like, okay, number one, number two. It's the same in any environment you're in. If you have a relationship with the community, if they know you, if they see you at Walmart, if they see you at the gym, if they see you doing whatever, like they're like, oh. Kind of what you said. We're just human. We're regular old folks. We're not Superman. We're not here to do a thing. We don't have a bias. We're just doing the job of being law enforcement. That's what our job does. But it's not who we are. We are people in this community. And I think
Absolutely.
I think to your point about your staff and just the organization and the steps that they've taken in the past and now into the future is building those relationships, building those connections.
Yeah.
And because you came in from the outside,
Right.
you wanted to be here.
Right.
And I think, and I'll spotlight you for a second. What brought you to Fort? What was like, that's the place I want to work. Like that's my jam.
So, like I said, I grew up in a very small town, Ray.
Yeah.
If you,
Oh, yeah.
You've been there, yeah. It's kind of you blink, you miss it, passing through kind
Right.
of deal. But before I came here, I worked for a small agency, Kiowa County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
small. 4 deputies there. So growing up in a small community, for me, it feels home for me.
Yeah.
And I knew when I got into law enforcement, I always knew I never wanted to work in the metro. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Living there, working there, that's just not my speed. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I love living in a smaller community, working there, but I also wanted to make also good money
Yeah.
for my family, provide enough for my family. Because unfortunately, when you go farther east in the state, rural community, rural departments, you don't get paid as much.
Yeah.
So to me, when I was leaving Kiowa County Sheriff's Office, I was looking around
Yeah.
what fit best for my view, and I seen Fort Morgan was hiring at the time and thought that was the best place that I would want to go. So I applied here and got lucky and got hired.
Well, and it's Fort Morgan's. It's small enough to be small, but it's
Right.
not big enough to be big.
Yeah, right. It's right in the middle.
It's right in that place
Right
where
in
it's
the
like
middle.
you like the 12,000 in town and the 30,000 in county. It's like, we're going to grow, and there's a whole conversation we can have about how much growth this town can sustain and if this town will grow and if people will let it grow. That's a whole other conversation. But I think our town is alive and there is a sense of heart and whatever here, and that's you can do your job here, but you can also continue to learn and expand.
Right.
Versus in a smaller town, it's like, well, I've seen everybody, I've arrested half of them, and that's all I know.
Yeah.
Right.
There is that weirdness of being, because my parents are from small town Montana, 10 miles from the Canadian border. It's a town of like about 100 right now. It's teeny tiny. Everyone knows everybody's business. And here you do know people's business, but it's not as isolated
Right.
and undiluted. There is some separation, so you don't feel like you're constantly under a microscope. But that's that pendulum of like, it's not too small, it's not too big. We're Goldilocks, basically. We're
Yeah.
just right.
Just right. Yeah, we're just right.
Right at the sweet spot. It's called the sweet spot. That's what you call that.
Put that on our city sign. We're the Goldilocks city. I don't know if that'll actually work. All right. Well, we've talked around it, but now we're going to hit into it. And then the last thing we're going to talk about, which is what you kind of mentioned at the beginning. So you have an idea or a proposal or a dream, however you want to call it, for a community panel. Talk us through why you want this, what's the need, what's the idea, how do we make this happen, and how do we get this done?
So I want to put together a community panel that would incorporate people from all different backgrounds. We have a very unique and very diverse community. So the needs of the refugees are different than the needs of the immigrants, which are different than the needs of a lot of our business owners, which are different than the needs of many of us in the community. So getting us all to understand what each other's needs are, how the police department can work to help you in those things, I think is important. So I'm trying to work together to get a community panel, representatives of all of those people. I think this next week I'm working on putting something out on Facebook and trying to get it in the newspaper and trying to do something to where I can get people who are interested to show up. I don't know if this is a neighborhood watch programs. We have thefts, as they're saying, a lot of thefts going up. I don't know if this is reinventing the neighborhood watch program or just something that's not a nationally known program, but something we can do with social media and different, there's WhatsApp and there's so many different things that we could do as a neighborhood just to let each other know what's going on in our neighborhood and watch out for each other. I don't know what that means. I want people in the community to come tell me what they think would work, and let's work together to try to come up with a solution, because my perspective is not the same as everybody else's. So let's get those perspectives to the same table and let's figure out a solution.
I love that idea. Once you get that out there on social media, we're going to start sharing that. And I, for one, sign me up. I'm in. I want to be involved. And this is what we've been needing, stuff that we've been needing. And I'm really hoping that we get community involvement just so we can help each other to transition out of this, whatever the heck it is.
I do too, and I'm looking at either doing it in a weeknight sometime or a weekend sometime where we can get a lot of people involvement, have a big meeting, community meeting, however many people want to get involved. Let's come together and figure out a solution and work together to
Possibly,
find.
maybe if some people can't do Zoom or maybe even live,
Sure,
something to
yeah.
where we can get community members that are at home that have kids or whatever the situation, that can also get involved just to get different perspectives, because that's self-accountability and perspectives are two of the things that I heard you mentioning that I believe are some of the things that will help our community transition out of this.
Well, and what we kind of talked about earlier was the idea of what policing looks like in certain places, policing in certain cultures and certain communities in the world so for those of you who are listening outside of Fort Morgan is a fantastic city, and it is weirdly wonderful. And I mean that in the most positive sense possible. And you guys can back me up on this, or correct me if I'm wrong, because I am delighted to be corrected many times. Fort Morgan, about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, before that, it was more of a transitory kind of situation. Like, people would come in, have seasonal jobs and leave. And I don't know, couple years, 10 years or whatever, it started to be a situation where those seasonal jobs started to be permanent. And so you had populations who were coming into Fort Morgan and they weren't leaving because it was a good place to live and they had jobs that lasted more than a season. And so in the last 10 years or a little bit more, you now have an incredible diversity. You have folks from the continent of Africa who come from Eritrea, Rwanda, Somalia. You have all that. You have folks from Central America, from Nicaragua, from Puerto Rico. You have from everywhere down there, and from Mexico. And then you have other people. You have other folks who are coming over from Europe. I've ran into some folks who speak German or who are I'm just like, what? This is the craziest thing in the world. I love it, but it now brings the question of, okay, well, what is this person or this culture or this people group's belief in policing? Well, their experience in a certain maybe South American or Central American country with authority might be not so great. There might be corruption there. They might look at a police officer and go, well, I know that they've been paid off and I don't trust them. So they come into that with that baggage, with that understanding. Right. You don't have that understanding. Y'all haven't experienced that within Fort Morgan.
Right.
We're not in that place. And then you have folks coming in from different countries and different places where authority is viewed differently. And this sounds like this is an opportunity to at least bring in stakeholders from those communities. We actually, right across the street from this, where we're at in this Methodist church, there's a community apartments, basically, where a lot of our African continent folks are staying and stuff like that. And we've actually been challenged recently, one of our pastors, by a couple people, and I'm down for it, literally just to walk over there and start talking to them and just being like, hey, we're not here to scare you. We're just here to talk. Like, can we sit down with somebody and just chat? And sometimes that's all it takes. And we learned this the hard way a couple years ago. There's like a Thursday night out or one of the night events. And someone told me, it was like, I guarantee you what's going to happen is, and it was like a city event. It wasn't a police event. It was a city event. And someone was like, hey, I guarantee you there's one people group you're not going to see here tonight. I'm like, who? They're like, oh, folks from Africa, the continent. I was like, well, why? Well, all they did is they just sent them notices, and they sent them emails, and they sent them Facebook messages. That's all they did. They didn't actually go and meet them. I was like, okay, well, I don't know if I believe that. Come that night, who was missing? Our African continent friends. And it was like significant. And I was like, I turned to this person, I was like, you were right. And she's like, yep. And she had tried to advise folks to say, hey, you need to do this. And this was like, I don't know, 2 years ago. And I just kind of sat there and I went, okay, we got some work to do. And I think even now in this day and age, like today, as we start to think about how it looks like, we got to figure out how to get into those communities and not do it in a threatening way, but doing it in a way like, hey, can we just start to build a relationship? Because to your point, that's where it helps. If you have staff who are able to know people and engage with people and tap into that, it's like, hey, let's talk to the imam, let's talk to whoever, let's talk to the pastor, let's talk to the priest. Let's begin the process of integrating those folks into our world so that we have an open line of communication, and then they can start to trust us. Then they're going to start to show up.
And I think where it starts is not recognizing the differences in each other, but what are the commonalities?
Yeah.
Every single culture wants a safe place to raise their family. Yeah. Every single culture wants education. We have these same things. So how about starting together with those and try to figure out, from a policing perspective, what can we do to make it safe? What can we do to make it a place that you want to raise your family? What can we do to help you there? Because everybody shares that. Yeah. Our view of how we do that may be different, and that's what we need to figure out, how we can do that to meet everybody's needs.
If you're keeping score at home, that's the second mic drop moment that the chief has dropped on this podcast.
He's full of them, just so you guys.
We're going for the hat trick. I don't know if we got enough time to pull it off, but we'll see. But I think that's right. It's, what do we share? Who are we? I mean, one of you guys said it. We're all just human beings.
Right.
Like we all bleed red. We all have hearts. We all have brains.
And another thing, people understanding to go talk to them, like you said, talk to them, because in our job, they do call us.
Yeah.
And we show up there and we handle the call, and just talking to them, you actually find out, they're same, and actually they're, find out some interesting facts about them and their culture and everything. You can learn a lot.
Yeah, and also understanding they see things on TV.
Yeah,
right.
So a lot of times the Muslim population here has fears that are legitimate fears based on what they see on TV, but not issues in our community. Right. And unless they feel comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, we're concerned about X, we don't recognize that fear. So we need to have them feel comfortable to say, we're concerned about this, and then we can try to alleviate that fear, because it may or may not be valid, but they only know what they see on TV, just as we do, most of us.
And sometimes it just comes down to the basic thing of mutual respect.
Yeah.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
You see some of the kids, when I go into the boxing gym and I'm wearing my uniform, some of them kind of shy back.
Yeah.
And I could pick them out right away, and the other kids come up and they start talking to me, and then they kind of brings them out of their shell. Yeah. And they're like, oh, okay. And so I go and talk to them and interact with them, hit the bag with them, hold the bag with them and stuff like that. And then they realize that, hey, this is not what I seen. This is not my perception anymore. This is a new perception for me. So it's nice to see.
I see it
really
all the time,
is.
and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. Well, I think let's check our time, because I just am always curious as to how much. 57 minutes. Okay. My longest podcast of record is an hour and a half, so we're not going for that record today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I don't got a half an hour more left in me. Okay, so it's interesting, because I think a lot of folks, and I've said this before, and I know you're probably getting tired of hearing me say it, but there are big city people who hear this and they're going to go, oh, that's wrong. You shouldn't.
Right.
And it's like, well, maybe in your world, in your experience, in your community, this is the case. Because I'm not gonna dismiss issues that people have had with DPD or APD or any of the police departments in Metro Denver. Like, it's not my job here. My job here is to say, there are good people in policing and law enforcement. They are out there. They may not be what you think they are. They may not be what you see, but they exist. And in our communities, in this one at least, we've got a pretty good group of folks who make sure we're protected. Between y'all and the sheriff's department, like, it's a pretty strong community with law enforcement. And I think, kind of to close it out, it's kind of a celebration of, you know what, we didn't come in here. I didn't have anything to be like, so Chief Sharp, I need your comments on this latest incident that happened. And I don't have that. I didn't have anything to be like, well, I heard this thing, and now, you know, there's nothing on the list that quantifies needing to bring it up to you. But it's like, that's a relief.
I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing, Ernie and Aaron, for the community.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. It starts with people of the community, all of us. It's all of us. It's not the police department. It's not you. It's all of us. Mm-hmm. And thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for letting us be a part of it.
Exactly.
No problem. We love to do what we're doing here, and we know if we don't work together, it won't work out. So.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, guys.
I'd say, yeah, thank you.
And we're here if you guys ever want to do a ride along.
Yeah, always. Come on and ride along.
Do you guys hear that? Community members, do you guys hear that? If you want to do a ride along
always welcome.
See what kind of stuff they're getting themselves into, and what kind of action goes on here in our community.
I have a story to tell you before we close this out. So I went on a ride with Westminster PD. This was like 15, 20 years ago. Dude was a SWAT officer. He had like 17 knives on him. Dude was like, it was out of control. He was what you would call BA. Like, he was just that bad. He's just that good. We got a call. We were halfway across town, and there was a fight at a rec center. Something bad had happened, fight at a bar. And an officer hit their alert button that they needed help. They couldn't communicate verbally, and 107 miles an hour through the streets of Westminster. I think we caught some air on some intersections. I'm not saying it's going to happen to you if you ride along with Fort Morgan. I'm just saying sometimes there are moments where you get to experience. And we got there. We were the farthest away. We got there. There were like 40 cop cars in this bar parking lot. Lights, sirens. Everyone was like, I was just like, oh my God. But ride-alongs can give you that experience. They can show you what it's like to be a police officer. Yeah, there's those moments where, you're hauling, you're moving to a dispatch. There's other times where you're rolling up to try and deal with a domestic, and you're trying to get people to calm down. Hey, guys, take a step back, breathe. Let's, go to your corners, and I'll deal with you each in a moment. We'll get this figured out. You end up being a counselor. You end up being kind of a person trying to make some peace at the end of the night. Yep. And then you have those moments where you come up on something, you're just like, oh man, this is rough. But policing is a many different thing. There's never one thing or the other.
We wear many hats.
And I will say, if you do a ride along and you're riding with one of these guys and they're going 107 through town,
please call you.
Remember that accountability piece we talked about earlier? Yeah.
Please
Let me
call.
give you my phone number.
Please call Police Chief Loren Sharp in the middle of the night, in the middle of the speeding, being like, you guys are crazy.
I go below the speed limit just so you guys know.
Very smart, officer. Very smart. All right. This has been a blast and a half. Thank you guys for joining us. We might try and do this again sometime.
Yeah, always down for it.
Do some stuff like that.
Yep.
I think on the next one, I'm going to reach out to some of the community members, get a little more of a diverse panel up here if they got different concerns. That would be amazing. So next time around, we'll invite a few more people.
Okay. My name is Aaron.
This is Ernie.
Paul.
John.
Loren.
And this has been the Gladiator and The Educator podcast. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for listening, folks. This has been In the Ring with the Gladiator and the Educator. If you have questions, send the show an email, gladiator@fortmorgangladiators.com. For more information on the gym and our classes, go to www.fortmorgangladiators.com. We offer all kinds of classes for all kinds of folks. Thanks for listening to our program. Team Gladiator, always. This podcast is produced by Create at Morgan. All content is created, written, edited, and produced by students and staff of Morgan County School District RE3. We are located at the Alternative High School Education Campus in Fort Morgan, Colorado. You can find us online at createatmorgan.org, email us at adelayedteacher@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter at createatmorgan. Thank you for tuning in to our podcasts.
mine.